Mr. Ambassador, I think we should start with the National Gallery exhibition on Canaletto, because, after all, that is one of the events, in a sense, of this 150th anniversary of the Italian unification. Venice, one American art critic said, Venice exists in the mind. Venice is improbable, it cannot be, yet it is. Venice, even when one is in it, is improbable. Well, that's a foreigner's view. How do the Italians perceive Venice?
Thank you very much for starting with Venice, which is a city, a landmark feature of the Italian extraordinary cultural reality, but also a city which reflects so vividly the enormous cultural heritage of my country, and also the projection, the vision to the future, because also Venice is such a vibrant and vital reality in terms of not only cultural events, but also a laboratory of ideas, of studies, political thinking, and even science events, which are really located there. So the modernity of Venice. Venice is under many respects for the Italians, is a dream for the Italian tourist, for Italian people of culture, for persons who go there temporarily, who have a direct connection to the city. And I'm very glad that the intensity of the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the Italian unity will be reflected in the next few weeks, in fact, through the important exhibit of Canaletto and his rivals, which is organized at the National Gallery of Arts, thanks to the support of important Italian donors, and first of all the Bracco Foundation. Bracco is a very important pharmaceutical company active in the United States and very much involved in events of cultural promotion and studies of major artistic trend in my country. Canaletto and his rivals, yes, they reflect a key point of Venetian artistic history, the 18th century. Canaletto has an amazing professional and artistic story, and it is very well reflected in the 21 canvas and 34 other works of himself and the main other author of his period, who are first of all Bellotto, his nephew, younger than him. He started also as a self-made man in a way, but in Canaletto workshop, imitating in a way, but showing an enormous talent really at the beginning, so to the point that for many years and even recently some of his work were completely confounded with the Canaletto, but giving the originality of his art, becoming a more mature painter, a more mature artist. And then all the others, Vanvitelli, Carlevaris, Mareschi, and especially Guardi. So this exhibit is not only a point in advancing studies on the 18th century painting and artistic life in Venice, but is also a very original approach of comparing this tension between the artists, comparing various masterpieces and leading figures in Venetian painting, and also to show how the tension, how it developed a discussion on techniques and concept and vision of these people, giving really an evidence to the extraordinary vitality of the Venetian culture in the 18th century, but also the vitality of a city which is so much involved through the Festival of Cinema, through the Biennale, and which is also candidate for becoming in 1219 the European city, the European capital of culture, which is really something that we expect and we wish to happen, in fact.
Bellotto, of course, worked all over Europe.
Absolutely.
He was the favorite portraitor of houses. You know, I mean, his architectural paintings in Poland, for example, were responsible for actually reconstructing the part of Warsaw that was destroyed by the Germans during the war. Right.
But it's true, the fortune of this artist was huge during their own time,
right.
But now it is equally grandiose.
Sure.
It is when you look at Van Vitelli also, the influence that he had on not only on the culture, on the Italian architecture, but the architecture worldwide, and we could connect easily to Palladio, to the classical, another important exhibit
right.
that we had just a few months ago, always in the framework of the celebration for the 150th anniversary, because you know the Italian unity happened on the 17th of March 1861, right. But the government, the major Italian institution, the President of the Republic, the Minister of Culture, decided last year, beginning of last year, that the whole year, starting from last autumn and ending up to this year end, had to be dedicated, to be an opportunity for highlighting the main feature which led to the Risorgimento and also to the Italian mentality of Risorgimento.
Yes, also among the Venetians we mustn't forget Piranesi, who went to live in Rome and did a great deal to leave records of Roman architecture, Roman ruins, etc.
He was exactly a great scholar. You mentioned Piranesi, Palladio. These were the architects, the drawers,
right.
the scholars of Roman of the Roman epopea.
Early conservationist, Piranesi, in my opinion. We're talking now about culture, and here you are, you're the ambassador to the United States. What is the role of culture in diplomacy?
Well, I believe it has a very key role. I would say on for certain aspect also a dominant role. If you look at culture, not only the aspect of promoting exhibit, artists, and so on, but a key element of soft power and in relation among states. And the more we refine the tools of diplomacy, the more we understand how dominant is the concept of soft power in diplomacy. There is no perspective possible in trying to improve the relationship between countries and among people which can stay away from this aspect. Culture in terms of communication of values, communication of ideas, of being more understood by the other, by our interlocutor. Culture as a key element of peace processes and the attempt of our world to find stability and security is also only understanding. And I think that this is an element which is very much high in the agenda of the American administration, as it is in the agenda of all the European chancelleries, and particularly for my government. So we believe that particular attention to the activity working in Washington, for instance, good considerable part of my work and the work of my colleagues is dedicated to being active part in discussion with universities, think tanks on various issues, foreign policy and security issues, but also issues which have to do with political thinking, with philosophy, with social and human let's say, humanities. So this is very important, and I think this embassy has an active part and very intense cooperation also with all the Washington, and not only Washingtonian reality, which is connected to cultural activities in the noble sense, which is especially the activities related to the thought of our time.
Let's talk a little bit about what it means to an Italian to be Italian. The idea of one's nationality in the American sense, the American fervor, if you like, doesn't seem to match with the way the Italians see it. I mean, Italians seem to be more inclined towards the region than they do towards this sense of nation, except of course when Italy is playing the World Cup, when absolutely everybody becomes Italian. But I mean, what is this? Is it something that's in shape because it's only 150 years old? After all, 150 years old is younger than the United States.
Absolutely.
What motivates Italians to be Italians?
Well, you say it is very true. We are a relatively young country, especially if you look at the other major, 3 or 4 major European countries. Britain as a state, or France as a unitarian state, have somehow a few centuries more than Italy. But in a sense, Italy was already a country for many centuries before getting the birth certificate on the 17th of March, and it was a country in exactly the constitutive part of his soul was very evident at the same time when the soul of the United States of America started to get a clear definition. It's fascinating. One of the revisitation that we did on this occasion is an important study that is going to be published quite soon, I hope, on the correspondence and intellectual relationship between Gaetano Filangieri and Benjamin Franklin. We were at the turn of the 18th century. In fact, this correspondence started in the 1770s, and then it was particularly intense between 1783 and 1787, the years when the build-up over the constitution of the 13 American colonies started taking place to become. Political thinking in America was very evident, and it is very well documented. So there is a parallel track in the way the America as a state, as a union developed, and Italy as a national conscience, as a national identity developed at the end of the 18th century. Then the American Revolution, we know, was prodromic to the French Revolution. The French Revolution changed all history of Europe, and that put the seeds also of the Italian national movement, which took at least 35, 40 years to become completely developed and to gain ground. So, to come back to your point, there is a strong identity factor in the way Italians look at themselves, both in Italy and abroad. And this is not overcome by the globalization effect. Mm-hmm. On the contrary, the easiness by which people as individual and as a group, as institution, communicate among themselves worldwide reinforces the identity factor of those who recognize themselves in a specific culture. This at least happens for my people. There is undoubtedly the social network, the communication, the web, and so on, is an element of reaffirming our culture in a way, in a close relation with other cultures, taking especially into account that a very strong component of the Italian mentality is the principle of dialogue, the principle of understanding, the principle of communicating. Coming back to Venice, how could you explain that Venice, for 1,000 years, was a sea power, then it became a land power, but all along these years, they had to deal, to fight, to make peace, to trade with the Ottoman Empire, with the Arab world, with the Muslim world. And they got along for 1,000 years. It's a story which is extremely modern.
They had good diplomats.
They were good diplomats, but they were also very strong in soft power, if I may say. That was an anticipation of what now is becoming a fashionable word, but I think that was the point. And again, the national identity. A few weeks ago, I was watching a debate on the Italian television, Italian channel, politically heated discussion, and a very important, prominent Italian businessman said to the others and to the audience, well, when we look at the image of my country, the image of Italy, the factor which is really important is the daily work of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Italians as individuals, as companies, and so on in the world. And that makes Italy a global country, a cultural superpower in a way. And that makes also strong, very strong, and appreciated the image of my country here in the United States. When you think that, according to the National Science Institute, there are 15,000 Italian scientists present, either on temporary basis or permanent basis here in the United States. That we have a very strong example of excellence in physics, for instance, at the Fermi Lab, which is a very important laboratory for studies of subnuclear physics. We have 70 researchers of Italian or Italian origin, not to mention the huge reality of cooperation in health science and so on, which is also supported by a reality of health say the researches, but also the health system in Italy is ranked as one of the 2 or 3 most effective and important health system in the world. Not only in Europe, but in the world. And that is also a reason why there are so many medical doctors and scientists in biotechnology, in health and so on, who are in the United States or who cooperate and have relationship with American entities and American realities.
Major achievement, the greatest achievement of this 150 years of unity. One thinks, for example, of the remarkable recovery of the post-war period, which we now call the economic miracle, and one thinks of a tremendous record as filmmakers. For me, that's itself a major achievement. But what would you say would be?
Well, when you look at the post-World War II history of my country, economic terms, you mentioned the rate of growth of our industrial production, between 1957 and 1960 was 42%, and that was initiated and supported by a unique example of cooperation across the two shores of the Atlantic, which was the Marshall Plan. It was also thanks to the stability and to economic and social policy of great Italian leaders like the Gasperi, like Einaudi, and the people of that period of time,
right,
who were confronting a reality, complete destruction of the industrial base because of the war, and also moral destruction, which was caused by the collaboration between the fascist regime, the complete subjection of the fascist regime of the Republic of Salò to the Nazi regime, and even before. We were talking just before, just initiating the interview about the commemoration of the Shoah, which my country is very keen of putting in strong evidence every 27th of January, and that was somehow a total derail from the course of the Risorgimento, because the Russian laws in 1938 were really a terrible point of fracture vis-à-vis the values of freedom, independence, national understanding, and so on, which are typical of the Risorgimento. But then, after the war, I mean, the country was able to find itself, also thanks to the fact that large part of the Italian population never accepted to be subjugated by the Nazi fascist regime. And then there was the recovery, the economic but also the moral recovery, the political conscience, the stability of our institution, a strong and very balanced constitutional charter, and then you see the development of the country up to the point of becoming one of the 6 major economies of the world. Remember, was a young diplomat in Rambouillet in 1970. Very young diplomat. I was there. I was not a policy maker, but I was there just in order to organize the delegation and to prepare the cars and to move the roads, and that was a particularly complicated point in a small castle of Rambouillet to accommodate already the participants, but much more many than President Giscard d'Estaing would have liked to have in a fireplace chat. But this was an extraordinary experience, because it was formal recognition of the level of Italian economy, and also the influence of Italy worldwide as a major player in security aspect around the world, a strong element in the Atlantic Alliance. And from then on, my country has been always a really protagonist on the stage of the world. Can see the example of the international affairs nowadays, how important is our presence in Afghanistan, Lebanon, in Africa, not only Mediterranean, but also in vis-a-vis relationship between Europe and Latin America, Central America. We are considered a very important.
This leads me into my other point, which is that there was an Italian presence in Iraq and there's an Italian presence in Afghanistan, both of which make Italy a strong ally of whatever the United States is trying to accomplish in both of these places. What is the state of U.S.-American relations and now at this point?
With Italy is a very strong.
I meant U.S.-Italian relations.
Yes,
you got the point.
Is a very strong partnership. I would say a special partnership. Although we know that there is a connotation which is given to this word, but that is how it is felt in Rome, and and by this embassy is a partnership which reflects on across-the-board consultation on the most difficult issues. We have shown a strong response and also capability of contributing in the field and in concrete terms. One example is when 1 year ago, at the time of the review policy on Afghanistan, President Obama called Prime Minister Berlusconi, anticipating the review and checking whether Italy was available to increase significantly its contingent. And the answer by my Prime Minister was immediately and without condition favorable to this increase of forces. And in fact, we were perhaps the first or among the two countries which increased the contingent in a more significant way, from 3,000 to 4,000 people, with very specialized and qualified element, expert for training, the Carabinieri and so on, who have been very much appreciated. I mention this because Afghanistan is a key concern for the security of our countries, of the countries which participate in ISAF, but especially we consider it as a national priority in terms of security of Italy, as the United States administration considered for the United States. But there are also many other aspects of this partnership, being that the close cooperation in fighting terrorism, a unique understanding between this administration and my government on how dialogue must be promoted in the Mediterranean. And we look now at what's happening in a number of Arab countries, and especially in Egypt and Tunisia, the method of supporting key values to stabilize these societies, values of freedom of thinking, refusing violence in whatever terms it could be applied, and to encourage these countries to proceed fast towards governments or transition phase, which could lead to a redefinition of their system and reinforcement of their democracy. So this is also an element of very intense cooperation at the political level between my country and the United States. And there we could see we are member of the same inner circles, G8 again, but also the G20. We look at each other eye to eye on major issues in macroeconomic policies, currency balance, the question of the necessity to find a strong way towards a sustained recovery of our countries, to relaunch employment. And so there is really a commonality of objectives and visions between Rome and Washington, also in these terms, how to move the G20 towards a true system of governance. And you know that in this category, I would like also to put the understanding on how strong should be the Euro monetary zone, the European monetary zone. I think that with all this debate, which is a public debate, more than I see a level of debate which is particularly intense among commentators, journalists, scholars, but I see less debate perhaps at the political level here in the United States, in the sense that the conviction that the future of Euro is not only promising, but it is a future which must be guaranteed for the stability of the international financial system is something which has taken a lot of ground here in Washington, and it is reinforced by what is happening in Brussels. And this is also a line of thinking to which my country has contributed very much. I can make the example of the visit President Napolitano, the President of the Italian Republic, last May when he met President Obama. The future of Euro was perhaps the major point of their conversation, and the story from then on has shown that the instruments which were launched by the Euro countries, by the Euro governments in June last year, and which have been progressively reinforced until now, show that the answer to the speculation and to the financial to the European financial stability, but also to the world financial stability, is yes, the euro is there to stay and to become stronger.
To economists and economic commentators who really cast this whole dialogue, this whole argument in a gloomier light, and say that before the end of this particular crisis in Europe, a number of countries are going to find themselves in great difficulty. Of course, we know about Greece and we know about Ireland, but people predict that the same malaise, the same idea that that they're going to be at a sort of crossroads on what to do in the future, whether to stay with the euro or not, includes Italy. Do you agree with this?
I am very familiar with the debate, and I think one major contribution was recently a long article by Paul Krugman.
Paul Krugman, yes.
Key figure in the economic environment, and I like very much. I'm a constant reader of his op-eds, and I'm very much impressed by his capacity of analysis. And Krugman drew a description of the evolution of the euro monetary zone, starting from the beginning, from the European community. And what is interesting, that his article was problematic under many respects, although he didn't highlight a number of factors to which I will come very soon. But the conclusion that Krugman put to the end of his article was somehow more a challenge than a prediction, than a negative prediction to the future. A challenge to the European countries to reinforce the instruments which are available and to reinforce the fiscal and economic political cooperation among themselves. And in a way, I think that this challenge has been, in a way, it's not the European leaders they act because they respond to Paul Krugman for how influential he is, but they acted on they have been acting on their own logic. In a sense, the European leaders are reinforcing the financial stability fund, the European Financial Stability Fund, and the European Stability Mechanism. They are ready to put more resources. They are acting through a use of bonds, which are linked to this. This for the technical aspect of diffusing possible speculation and so on, and stabilizing the area. But there is, and I wanted to come to a very basic factor, which is perhaps stronger than myriads of data and consideration. The construction of the European Union has always moved forward and never backward. It has stalled certain historical phases. It has faced difficulties. But it has been a long-term process which has always improved and put bricks above bricks and in constructing in the construction of the European house. When you look at the last 20 years, for instance, starting with the European political cooperation in the early 90s, and then to the Maastricht Treaty, to the Treaty of Amsterdam, to the Treaty of Rome, and then on to Lisbon. This has been a sequential improvement of tools and political decision and political willingness to be stronger in political coordination in foreign security policy, but also in economic and fiscal coordination. More recently, when you consider the last decade in comparison to the previous decade, you see that all the indicators in the Eurozone point to very considerable improvement of the macroeconomic and microeconomic conditions of the Eurozone. Inflation was reduced by more than 30%. Growth, although modest, has been considerably higher in the last decade in comparison to the previous one. The vitality for small and medium enterprises, and this regards very much my country, there has been a birth rate which has been more active for small and medium companies over the last decade, and so on and so on. So innovation, productivity of labor, and all these indicators show that Euro was an extraordinary achievement, and it is an economic idea which has been working. Now, we don't have to forget, quite frankly, that the Euro crisis was determined by something which happened outside, not within Europe,
and
not within the Eurozone. And we know very well what the Minister of Finance talks about the monster of the video game, which you can kill him, but you never know what is the next monster which is resurfacing. And that is why my economic authority are so keen in inserting in the regulation of the future, which is Basel III, for instance, concepts which are quite in line with the Volcker rule or with the supervisory activity and verification activity that was inserted in financial reform in the United States, and we would like very much to see implemented, because that is the need of stronger stability of the financial area.
On the other hand, yes, you mentioned the structural part of this effort to let's say rescue anyway the economy or reinforce the economy. One of the problems, it seems to me, is that if the domino effect takes hold in the eurozone, you might end up needing more money than is actually available. In the sense, there is no institution, as far as I can see, in Europe that will provide the kind of backup that, say, Spain would need, to mention another country that is supposedly teetering on the brink. I mean, not to say Italy, but it's the conclusion that these commentators have come to, is that the euro in itself was a good idea, but it didn't really have the foundation that would deal with an eventual crisis when the crisis arrived.
The interesting part of the story of which developed since last April last year, is almost 1 year history of the management of the currency crisis, of the financial crisis, showed that the Eurozone government did prove a reaction capability which was maybe at the beginning not as fast as my country would have wished, but then once undertaken came up in a very strong and determined way. and the creation of the mechanism that I mentioned, the decision of the European Council last June,
yes,
and all the other subsequent decisions, the policy decision, the minor modification but significant modification of the Lisbon Treaty, which is going to be undertaken in order to provide a firm legal, although we believe that there is already a legal framework which is applicable to the financial mechanism which has been adopted, but there are countries which, for their internal consideration, and they require some more explicit definition of the legal framework. This is taking place already, and this is. So it is true that when we are talking about many hundred of billion of dollars or trillion of dollars or euros in order to stabilize the financial market, these are very strong figures. But what is the difference between the euro and the dollar to this effect? If we look at the figure of the American debt, the federal debt, the debt of the states, we are looking at probably figures and ratios which are even more impressive than those which exist and which are a concern of the Eurozone. So I think, again, if we enjoy of a strong cooperation between European Union and the United States, between Italy and the United States, we unfortunately are facing similar challenges and similar threats to our economy, and that is even an added reason, fundamental reason, to cooperate in reinforcing our currencies and our financial and our monetary stability and financial stability. And I think this is the direction which has been undertaken by this administration already at the beginning of the euro crisis with the Greece problem beginning last year, and so on. And we count very much. We tend to be more optimistic than inclined to make self-fulfilling prophecies.
But is this new structure that is being built around the euro, in a way, retroactively, going to lead to something which I think many European governments would worry about, which is more central control from Brussels as to how economic recovery programs are put into effect and are managed in separate countries?
First of all, I believe that now is commonly understood by all the European capitals, those which belong to the Eurozone as those which are not in the Eurozone, that the stability of euro is fundamental for a mature growth of the European economy, of all the 27. And this is understood, and there's a very, very close cooperation among all European capital, not only within the Eurozone, but across the board. And I believe that this aspect of more power to Brussels, what does it mean? Yes, it is an easy slogan, but when we look at the Lisbon Treaty, there is no doubt the Brussels institutions have been reinforced, but they've been reinforced in a very democratic way, and with a clear attention to the saying that European citizens in the working and in decision-making process of these institutions. Take the European Parliament, for instance. The European Parliament previously, before Lisbon, had just a consultative role. Now, for certain matters, it has a true legislative role. Take the relationship between the Commission and the European Council. One, let's say, the executive body, the other one, the political body. This relation has been integrated under many aspects. The High Representative for European foreign policy. This has been an integration between the Commission, some Commission functions, and the European Council function. So there is no doubt that there has been a trend toward reinforcing the European institution. But we are very happy for that. It's not the contrary. There are a number of countries, I would say the founding members, the core group which have somehow inspired the philosophy of the Union, without being necessarily all of them federalists, but the philosophy of the Union has been to move towards from a pure possibility of free trade, free movement of person, of capital, three-dimension movement, free movement of people, capital, and goods, to something much more sophisticated and politically relevant. And now, the fact that there are stronger institutions which at the same time reflect better the responsibility of the European citizens, it is a plus, it's not a minus.
You were Italian ambassador to the UN at the time when the word reform was being bandied about and all sorts of changes were being suggested. And it was said that at the time, in reference to the enlargement of the Security Council, that the Italians were against any change in the number of permanent members with veto power, and that the claims of the BRIC
a role, and it was a deliberate decision of my government, and has been a decision which was confirmed by all subsequent governments which led my country since 1993. When I was, before coming here, again involved in debates which from time to time were even a little bit heated in the General Assembly. We were coming out from the usual language and even protocol of the General Assembly in the working group, and also in the negotiating with the Manzo we were together there. We were making a distinction which is very simplistic, but the distinction was between elected members to the Security Council and non-elected members to the Security Council. Being non-elected member, the 5 permanent members. And why we have always objected to the creation of new permanent members. Not because we are dreaming of a world where the Charter of the United Nations could be completely redesigned and to put in question the existent 5 permanent members, because that cannot be done, and very probably is not even useful to do in order to reinforce the multilateral system. Because
why can it not be done? I mean,
it cannot be done from a legal point of view for a very simple reason, that any modification of the Charter must be accepted by the P5, by each one of the P5. And can you imagine an American Congress or a French Parliament or the British Commons or even the Central Committee of China or Duma ratifying a modification of the Charter when they do karakiri practically, and they lose the position. So that cannot be done from a legal point of view, but for political reasons, for the same reason, and also not be wise probably because the P5 have shown over the years an enormous conscience and capacity to exert their own responsibility when they are sitting in the Security Council, and it is very evident. I'm talking as a friend of the United States, France, and UK, as friend of Russia and China, but also it's very evident also for an observer that there is an intellectual attitude and also the resources which are dedicated by the P5 to the functioning of the organization are very important, and in this sense is an interest of the international community to keep the P5 as they are. But no new P5, please. No new permanent member for a very simple reason that this institution was created in the aftermath of World War II for a total reconfiguration of the international community, international relations, which, thanks God, is not happening now. We have not had a major catastrophe with loss of tens of millions of people in the tragedy of the war. And the concept of being appointed once and to remain forever occupying a position without any subsequent scrutiny by the General Assembly, which is really the body which elects all the members to the different position and capacity of the United Nations. It is something which, in our opinion, is in conflict, in strong conflict with the principle of democracy, national sovereignty, and responsibility that the country won't play. So we cannot really be in a reality of double standard when we say, yes, democracy is good within our countries. It is something that it must be assured as an element for making our societies functioning. And we forget this when we are talking about the United Nations, the multilateral system, and we say, no, but for the multilateral system, democracy is not a factor. It doesn't matter whether 90% of the countries of the United Nations want to have a certain institution more than another, just because there is a cooptation system or there is a self-appointing system, and we work on other. That is the ground, basic moral ground on the position that Italy has on the Foreign Security Council. And more than that, since the United Nations are in strong need of supports in terms of resources, commitment to peacekeeping operation, commitment to the values which are inserted in the Charter, it is important to find a reform of the Security Council which gives the opportunity to everybody to have the perspective of sitting more frequently, of contributing more frequently to the Security Council. And the way of going through an election of the General Assembly to show that you are a good and reliable guy and that you could deliver once you are in the Council. And the decision you are contributing to are good decisions which could be respected by the whole membership. This is the master plan that we believe should be taken.
And how far away are we from that?
There is some new ground which has been taken by ideas like regional representation, institutions which are representing group of states which could have a way of sitting in the Council. For instance, we have been for a long time advocates of a presence of the European Union per se in the Security Council. Maybe sitting on the seat which is covered by the presidency of. We don't necessarily ask for a seat for the Union, but the Union could use the seat of the European member states, which could engage in representing the Union views and not only its national views.
By rotation.
By rotation, by longer-term presence. There are way of there is an institutional architecture which could foresee longer-term seats in the Council instead of biannual seat to have perhaps 3 or 4 terms seats. And this question, well, according to different regions of the world, there is a differentiated attitude. But to say that the question of regional representation has been getting new ground over the last couple of years.
The Arabs, for example.
The Arabs are interested. The Arab League is interested in having a better representation. The African Union, absolutely the same. There is also the Organization of Islamic Conference, which has a similar expectation. So these are elements of discussion. We are not very close to a solution, but it's much better to continue a negotiation more than having a solution which in fact will put a stamp on the credibility, negative stamp on the credibility.
It will take a General Assembly vote in any case, I presume.
It will take a vote. The process, the charter must be revised. That means that it should go to the Security Council and then to the vote of General Assembly and to the ratification of the National Parliament.
You talked about earlier on about the broader existence of a kind of an Italian identity that is global. This country, of course, has an enormous kind of heritage connection with Italy because of its various generations of immigrants and so on. And indeed today, Italians, Americans with certain qualifications can actually vote for the members of the Italian Parliament.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what is the connection between the ambassador, the embassy, and the Italian-American community? Because some ambassadors have actually said that there is not much connection, but some, consider it of great importance.
Well, I believe it is not only because of the important development of the vote, the recognition of the right to the Italian citizen to vote also when they are abroad. It is an important development in our system, and therefore now you have member of parliament who are resident. Of course, Italian citizenship is the precondition. They are permanent resident abroad, and in a way they are elected through the contribution of the Italian citizens who are abroad, although the number of those seats are taken on the global amount of seats. They are dedicated to the Italian, to the elected abroad, but on the global number of seats of the Italian Parliament. And the relationship between our diplomatic network and communities of Italian citizens or American or Italian origin, Latin American, in Brazil, in Argentina, Uruguay, where we have very, very important communities, in Canada. But talking about Italian of American descent, American of Italian descent, or Italian in the United States, the relationship with the embassy and with our consular offices, the cultural institutes, is very intense and very, very important. I was just hinting at the concept, which has not only repeated recently by this prominent businessman in a talk show, as I was mentioning, but a concept that Italian who are active and to contribute to a society like the American one are really the best representative of my country. Is a concept which is very much felt by my government, by my President of the Republic, by the Italian Parliament. And that is why we try to keep our relationship intense, but also to work together on many instances. Take, for instance, the promotion of the Italian language in American high school and colleges. Some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, College Board of New York decided that the conditions were not right to continue the advanced placement program. And then that was a great disappointment of my authorities that Italy was excluded from the AP program. Then, when I came here, I realized also, thanks to the advice of very prominent personalities of the Italian-American community, that a first objective of my mission should have been in the cultural area, but just mention how important culture is in the global economy of our foreign policy. Major point was to bring back the teaching of Italian to the AP. And then we started a true campaign with the enormous help of the major Italian-American organizations, but also Italian companies which were ready to support financially the contribution which are necessary for the College Board, and of course the determination of my authorities and my government. And last November I had the great satisfaction at the presence of Undersecretary Vincenzo Scotti in New York to sign the contract with the College Board to again have the advanced placement program reinstated for Italian. So I'm mentioning this just to show how, on practical terms, also there are great projects which can move ahead if there is a strong support, and even more so if there is a strong support and conviction of the major Italian-American organization, which are also active in research, in promotion of science cooperation, in promotion of also personal contacts, and they show their enormous generosity whenever there is a major tragedy in my country. The terremoto of Abruzzo is an example on how much financial contribution there was also from Italian-American organizations. So it is a constant, and in a way, the aspect which is very fascinating for a diplomat here is really representing a country which has given such a great contribution. And this was said by President Obama in the proclamation for the Columbus Day last October, when he related the 150th anniversary to the big contribution, to the enormous contribution that Italian communities in the United States gave to the political life, to the economic and cultural life of this country.
To my phone ringing a few minutes, some time ago, it was a terrible thing. I forgot to turn it off.
No, I hope it was not a terrible thing, which the news that you got. I mean,
no, I'm sorry about that.
Some major upheaval in the world.
Nice. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the conversation, and I hope that you have enough element to